These Little Debbie Christmas tree cakes haunt me every time I go to the grocery store. I don't get them because this nostalgic spongy cake filled with a Swiss buttercream frosting is also a whopping 32 carbs for just this tiny piece of cake. That's unacceptable, Little Debbie. I made a version that looks better than these delicious chemical-filled cakes, plus they're only 3 carbs per cake. Not only that, but my family actually preferred my Little Annie's Christmas tree cakes compared to Debbie's. To start, you need a box of keto cake mix. Here you can use any keto cake mix you want, just follow the instructions on the box on how to make it. This one called for 5 eggs, some avocado oil and nut milk, which I used macadamia nut milk. King Arthur is my favorite brand of keto cake mix because it's gluten-free, but I also think it tastes the best. Obviously, you could make keto cake from scratch if you wanted to, but that's a lot of effort. Plus, this cake mix is going to taste just as good, if not better. To bake the cake, you need to pour it into a baking sheet. You want a thin cake that's about, let's see, how thick is this? What do I have to compare it to? I got nothing. Actually, it's about as thick as like my finger. I'll insert a more appropriate measurement right here. That's probably gonna be a little bit more helpful. Say it's like a 1/2 inch thick. Basically, I recommend using either 1 full baking sheet, which would be a half-size baking sheet in baker's terms, or 2 smaller sheets that are quarter-size baking sheets. I did the 2 quarter-size baking sheets because you end up getting more trees from them, and you'll see why in a second. Spray them with cooking spray first, and then lay down some parchment paper, which is very important to keep your cake from sticking to the bottom of the pan. Using your good eye, try adding equal amounts of the batter to both pans. Spread it out or give it a tap just so that it's even. And then we're gonna bake this in a 375-degree oven for 10 to 12 minutes or until the cake is set on top. Don't overbake it or else your cake is gonna get dry and crumbly around the edges when you go to punch out your trees. And this is what they're gonna look like when they're done. Immediately you wanna run a knife around the edges just to help loosen it up. But I'm gonna let these cool on the sheets while I work on the frosting. If you're afraid your cake is gonna stick to the pan because, well, you have crappy pans, you could, after 5 minutes, transfer it to a wire rack to cool completely. But I have these nice nonstick Nordic pans, so I'm not concerned with that. To go along with my Little Annie cakes, I'm making a keto hot chocolate. And with Element Electrolytes, my sponsor for the video, I can use their chocolate salts to make a keto hot chocolate in under a minute. You can get the original Element chocolate salt anytime, but they recently released a new medley of chocolate salts. And this limited edition set includes chocolate mint, chocolate chai, and chocolate raspberry. Of course, each packet still contains their normal science-backed electrolyte formula of 1,000 milligrams of sodium, 200 milligrams of potassium, and 60 milligrams of magnesium. With just hot water and 1 packet of Element, you can get the necessary electrolytes that you might be lacking while still enjoying a hot cup of cocoa that's only 1 carb and 5 calories. Right now, Element is offering my viewers a free sample pack with any order. That's 8 single serving packets free with any Element order. It's a great way that you can try all 8 flavors. Get yours at drinkelement.com/ketofocus. This deal's only available through my link, and it's a great way to try Element risk-free because if you don't like it, just give it away to somebody you think that would, and Element will refund your money, no questions asked. For the filling, you could go with the easy peasy route and just use a tub of keto frosting that you buy from the store, but that's not what Little Debbie uses. I think she makes a Swiss meringue buttercream frosting, which is lighter and silkier. It's not quite as sweet. It kind of has an underlying marshmallowy flavor, which is because it uses egg whites. So that's what we're gonna do. You're gonna add in 4 egg whites, 3/4 of a cup of sugar-free sweetener, and 1/4 teaspoon of salt. Add this to a heat-proof bowl and then mix it until it's combined. Then we're gonna place this bowl over a saucepan that is filled with 1 inch of boiling water. You don't want the bowl to be submerged into the water. You just want the steam to rise up and gently heat the egg whites and the sweetener. Keep stirring this with a spatula until the sweetener dissolves and it reaches a temp of 160 degrees Fahrenheit, which will take around 5 minutes. And while you stir, just scrape down the sides of the bowl to make sure there's no grains of sweetener are lurking around because this is gonna affect the texture of your frosting. You want a smooth, silky filling inside of these Little Annie's cakes. And we're here at 160 degrees, so carefully remove the bowl from the double boiler setup, and then we're gonna whip this into meringue. Whisk on medium-high speed until stiff peaks form. This is gonna take around 10 minutes or so. So get a chair or use a stand mixer or just use the tub of frosting if you just feel like this is too much effort. But really, I hope you don't, because this is truly what makes these cakes so good. We're not quite there with the stiff peaks. Stiff peaks are when meringue or whatever you're whipping in place, the peaks stay in place, pointed up, just similar to like a Chihuahua's ears. These look more like a Labrador's ears. They just flop down. So we got a little bit more beating to do. Now we're here. Lower the speed of the mixture to low and add in 1 to 2 tablespoons of unsalted butter at a time, mixing in between until it's all incorporated. You're gonna end up adding 1.5 cups of butter here. It's still buttercream frosting, so you need the butter. At some point, you're gonna get this creamy, silky frosting. And I forgot to show you because I got so excited that this was just looking and tasting so good, I forgot to add in the vanilla. You'll need 1.5 teaspoons of vanilla extract in here. Time to cut out our trees. Carefully lift the cake out of the baking pans, and if it cracks along the edges, no worries, because you're not even gonna use the edges for this recipe. The easiest way to cut these out is to use a Christmas tree cookie cutter. I have this one that I used. I'll have it linked down below. This is around 2 or 3 inches tall, and you'll start with one end of the cake and then punch out the trees. You want to continue punching in a way that doesn't waste your cake and it gives you as many trees as possible. This first one, I was not very thoughtful and I didn't get as many trees as I wanted to, but the second one I made up for it. But you can see why I went with the 2/4 sheet pans. I'm just able to get more trees and waste less. And all of this either gets tossed or you can save it and make cake pops. Eyeballing all of this that's left over, it looks like I only used about half of the cake. So I did reflect that in my macro calculation. Of course, my macros might be different from yours because it depends on what sort of cake you used and then how many trees you cut out and the size of your cookie cutter. To assemble the trees, I felt it was best to cut each of the tree in half rather than stacking the two together, because that would make for a really thick cake. So taking a serrated knife, I just cut straight through down the center of each cake. Then you pipe on the frosting or you spread it on with a spatula. Another option here for the filling is just to use some sugar-free whipped cream. That would be easier, but again, it's not gonna taste as good as this Little Annie's recipe. And these are starting to look like the real deal. All that's left to do is to cover them with melted chocolate. I'm sure Little Debbie uses candy melts, which obviously aren't low carb, so I'm gonna have to use sugar-free white chocolate instead. To the white chocolate, I'm gonna have to add a few teaspoons of coconut oil to help thin it out. I'm gonna melt this in the microwave at 30-second intervals, stirring it in between until it's melted. But if you think the microwave's the devil, you could actually do this over the double boiler because you should still have that out from earlier. Once it's this perfect runny consistency, it's time to coat the cakes. At first I tried spooning the chocolate over the cake, hoping that the melted chocolate would just run down the sides, which it did, but it just didn't cover all of it. I didn't want to waste my melted chocolate, so I thought maybe using a brush was a better idea, but that didn't really work. Finally, I came to my senses and realized the best option is just to dip the sides of the cake into the melted chocolate, and then spoon more of the chocolate over the top. Before the chocolate sets, sprinkle it with some green sprinkles. You can cheat here and use the sugar kind if you want. I'm not gonna tell if you don't tell. But you can actually make your own, which is some granulated sugar-free sweetener and some food coloring. Then you're gonna pipe on the red stripe made from more frosting mixed with red food coloring. And I put these in the refrigerator until the chocolate was set. I do recommend storing them in the refrigerator or the freezer just because sometimes that chocolate can melt at room temperature. This makes 2 Little Debbie recipes that I successfully made low carb. If you wanna see how I turned her oatmeal cream pies into keto versions, then click right here.